The massive Valerian ships floated like dead whales in the endless darkness of space. Commander Thalvin pressed his 4 hands against the command console, feeling the vibrations as another engine died somewhere deep in the ship's belly. The lights on his bridge kept getting dimmer, and the air was starting to smell stale and metallic. "Commander, we've lost main power on the Stellar Dawn," his communications officer called out, her voice cracking with fear. "That's the 3rd ship this hour." Thalvin closed all 4 of his eyes and tried to think. His people had traveled the stars for thousands of years. They had technology that could bend space and time, weapons that could crack planets, and medical knowledge that had defeated death itself. But none of that mattered now. They were dying, slowly and helplessly, in a place where no one would ever find them. The hyperspace jump had gone wrong in the worst possible way. Instead of the smooth transition they had done countless times before, something had ripped their engines apart from the inside. 12 proud exploration ships, each one a masterpiece of Valerian engineering, were now drifting metal coffins carrying 50,000 souls toward a cold, lonely death. "Sir, the Morning Star is reporting complete. Life support failure," another officer announced. "They're asking permission to begin emergency evacuations to other ships. But where could they go? Every ship was failing. Every backup system was pushed beyond its limits. The Valerians had always been proud of their perfect technology, their precise calculations, their ability to solve any problem with enough math and science. None of that was helping them now. Thalvin walked to the large window that showed the star field around them. Somewhere out there was a small yellow star with a few rocky planets circling it. His science teams had detected primitive radio signals coming from the 3rd planet, the kind of basic electromagnetic noise that young civilizations made when they were just learning to use electricity. "Commander," his aide whispered, approaching carefully. "The crew is starting to panic. Some are talking about using the escape pods." "To go where?" Thalvin asked quietly. "We're light years from the nearest inhabited world. The pods would keep them alive for maybe a week." The truth was settling over everyone like a heavy blanket. They had been so confident when they left. Their home system, eager to explore new worlds and make contact with other civilizations. The Valerian Exploration Council had chosen them for this mission because they were the best, the brightest, the most capable crews in their entire military. Now they were learning what every explorer eventually discovers. Space doesn't care how advanced you are, how smart you think you are, or how many backup plans you've made. Space is vast and cold and completely indifferent to whether you live or die. One small mistake, one tiny miscalculation, and even the most advanced civilization could find itself helpless and alone in the dark. Communications Officer Nexara had been staring at the same screen for 6 hours straight, hoping to find something, anything that might help them. Her large, sensitive ears were designed to pick up the faintest whispers from across the galaxy, but all she heard was the steady hum of dying ships and the occasional crackle of failing electronics. Then something changed. A burst of electromagnetic noise came from the 3rd planet in this forgotten system. At first she thought it was just natural interference from the planet's magnetic field, but as she fine-tuned her equipment, patterns began to emerge. "These signals are strange," she murmured, adjusting her headset. The sounds were completely unlike anything in the Valerian database. Instead of the clean, organized transmissions that civilized species used, these were messy and chaotic. Multiple different signal types were broadcasting at the same time, overlapping and interfering with each other. She isolated one stream and listened carefully. It sounded like voices, but speaking in dozens of different languages she had never heard before. Some were musical and flowing, others were sharp and choppy. The technology behind the transmissions was incredibly primitive, basic radio waves that any first-year engineering student could build. "Commander," she called out, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice. "I'm detecting electromagnetic activity from the 3rd planet. But, sir, these signals they're very basic. Multiple crude languages, simple radio transmissions. It's like listening to children playing with their first communication devices." Commander Thalvin barely looked up from his damage reports. Another ship had just lost artificial gravity, and 3 more were reporting critical system failures. The idea that anything from this backward system could help them was almost insulting. These beings were probably still hitting rocks together to make fire, but Nexara kept listening. The more she heard, the more fascinated she became. These primitive creatures seemed to be broadcasting everything: music, voices, talking rapidly, about things she couldn't understand, even what sounded like entertainment programs. There was an energy to their communications, a liveliness that was completely different from the formal, efficient transmissions of advanced civilizations. "Sir," she said again, this time more urgently, "there's something unusual about these signals. They're not just random noise, there's organization here, patterns. These beings are actively communicating across their entire planet." A new alarm started blaring somewhere in the ship. Another power core had failed, and the lights dimmed even further. In the growing darkness, Thalvan finally looked at Nexara's readings. The electromagnetic signatures showed a world that was buzzing with activity, covered in transmission stations, filled with beings who never seemed to stop talking to each other. "They're primitive," he said flatly. "Stone Age savages with basic radio technology. What could they possibly do for us?" But even as he said it, desperation was starting to creep into his voice. They had tried everything else. Their best engineers couldn't fix the quantum drives. Their most advanced computers couldn't calculate a way out of this system. Ship after ship was dying around them. Nexara looked at her commander with all four eyes wide with hope. "Sir, maybe being primitive isn't always a bad thing. Maybe they know something we don't." Thalvan stared at the readings for a long moment, listening to the sound of his fleet slowly dying around him. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Send our distress beacon toward that world. Perhaps the universe will grant us one final mercy." Dr. Kim Soo was having the most boring night shift of his career. The deep space monitoring station outside Seoul was usually quiet, picking up nothing but cosmic background radiation and the occasional signal from old satellites. He had been sipping his third cup of coffee and reading a research paper when every screen in the facility suddenly went crazy. The main display erupted with lines of data streaming faster than he had ever seen. Red warning lights started flashing, and alarms began beeping throughout the building. At first, Sue thought it was a system malfunction. Maybe a solar flare had hit their equipment, or someone had accidentally pointed the antenna at a microwave tower. But as he looked closer at the data, his coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. This wasn't random noise or equipment failure. This was a signal, and it was unlike anything humans had ever detected before. "Oh my God," he whispered, his hands shaking as he adjusted the computer settings. The signal was coming from deep space, somewhere beyond Neptune. It was structured, mathematical, and incredibly complex. But underneath all the technical data, there was something else, something that made Sue's heart race with excitement and terror. This was a cry for help. He grabbed his phone and started making calls. First to his supervisor, then to the Korean Space Agency, then to anyone who would listen. Within 20 minutes, every major observatory on Earth was pointing their instruments toward the same spot in space, confirming what Sue had discovered. By the time President Park arrived at the emergency meeting in Seoul, scientists from around the world were already working together to decode the message. The conference room was packed with the best minds from every major space agency: Americans, Russians, Europeans, Chinese, Japanese, Indians, all crowded around computer screens and whiteboards covered in equations. "What exactly are we looking at?" President Park asked, still trying to understand why he had been woken up at 3 in the morning for what sounded like science fiction. Dr. Sue stood up, his clothes wrinkled from working all night. "Sir, this is a distress signal from an alien civilization. We've run every test we can think of, and there's no doubt about it. Someone out there is in serious trouble." The room fell completely silent. Everyone had dreamed about this moment, first contact with another intelligent species, but nobody had imagined it would happen like this, with desperate strangers calling for help from the darkness of space. "How far away are they?" asked General Kim from the Korean Air Force. "About 40 astronomical units," Sue replied, "just beyond our outer solar system. Close enough that we might actually be able to do something about it." "Do something?" The president looked confused. What could we possibly do? We barely have the technology to get to Mars. Sue pulled up another screen showing the decoded portions of the message. Mathematical symbols, star charts, and what looked like technical specifications filled the display. Sir, they're not asking us to come get them. They're asking for help, for ideas, for any solution we might have. They seem to think that sometimes a fresh perspective can solve problems that experts can't. The room buzzed with quiet conversations as military leaders and scientists tried to understand what this meant. Humanity's first contact with aliens, and they were being asked to be the rescuers instead of the rescued. We have to try, Sue said firmly, looking around the room at all the worried faces. They're asking for help. We can't just ignore that. Captain Lee Min stood on the bridge of the Taiguk, watching the most incredible sight he had ever seen. Ships from every corner of Earth were arriving at the assembly point near the moon. American destroyers, Russian cargo vessels, Japanese research ships, European mining craft, Chinese transport vessels, and dozens of others. In 48 hours, humanity had put together the largest space fleet in its history. Captain, the Americans are requesting permission to dock, his communications officer reported. They want to transfer some of their engineers to our ship. Min nodded, still amazed at how quickly everything had come together. 3 days ago, he had been running routine patrol missions around Earth's orbital stations. Now he was commanding an international rescue mission to save an alien civilization that most people didn't even believe existed yet. The Taiguk had been chosen as the flagship, not because it was the biggest or most powerful ship, but because it had the most advanced communication systems. Min's crew would need to coordinate with vessels from 23 different nations, each with their own languages, procedures, and ways of doing things. Down in the cargo bay, Chief Engineer Park, Hannah was performing miracles. She had somehow managed to pack equipment from every major space agency on Earth into a space designed for half as much cargo. Welding equipment floated next to boxes of computer parts. Fusion reactor components were strapped down next to crates of hand tools that looked like they belonged in someone's garage. Hannah, please tell me you have a plan for all this stuff, Min said over the intercom as he watched her directing the loading process. Plan? Hannah's voice crackled back slightly, out of breath. Captain, half this equipment wasn't designed to work together. The American fusion couplers don't fit the Russian power systems. The Japanese computers can't talk to the European navigation gear. But we'll make it work somehow. We always do. That was the thing that amazed Min the most about this whole mission. On paper, it was completely impossible. Humanity barely had the technology to travel to the outer edges of their own solar system, let alone rescue an advanced alien civilization. Their ships were slow, their equipment was primitive, and they had no idea what they would find when they got there. But somehow, nobody seemed to care about the impossible odds. Engineers were already working around the clock to modify equipment they had never seen before. Linguists were trying to decode alien technical manuals using nothing but math and hope. Military leaders were planning rescue operations for ships they couldn't even imagine. The international crew was a mixture of the best and brightest from every nation, along with a healthy number of people who were just crazy enough to volunteer for a mission that might get them all killed. There were NASA astronauts working alongside Russian cosmonauts, Korean engineers sharing tools with European technicians, and Japanese scientists comparing notes with Indian mathematicians. Captain, his first officer said quietly, the final ship count is in. We have 47 vessels ready to depart, with over 2,000 crew members from 23 nations. Min looked out at the assembled fleet, a collection of ships that had never been designed to work together, crewed by people who barely spoke the same languages. It was chaotic, inefficient, and completely insane. It was also the most human thing he had ever seen. All ships, this is Captain Lee Min, he announced over the fleet-wide communication channel. We don't know exactly what we'll find out there, but we'll figure it out when we get there. That's what humans do best. Commander Thalvin stared at his sensor readings in complete disbelief. The approaching human ships looked like they had been built in someone's backyard workshop. Their hulls were patched with different types of metal, their engines were smoking, and half their equipment seemed to be held together with some kind of metallic tape. Sir, how are they even moving? his science officer asked, equally confused. According to our scans, their fastest ship should barely be able to reach 1/10 light speed, but they're traveling at warp velocities that should be impossible with their technology. Thalvin watched as the human fleet approached his dying ships. The lead vessel was broadcasting a message in broken Valerian, clearly run through some kind of basic translation program. "This is Captain Li Min of Earth. We received your distress call. We're here to help." Help? These beings looked like they were using technology that the Valarians had abandoned thousands of years ago. Their ships were powered by simple fusion reactors. Their computers were barely more advanced than calculators, and their communication systems were so primitive they had to rely on radio waves. But somehow, impossibly, they were here. The first human to board the Valerian flagship was Chief Engineer Park Hana, a small woman carrying a toolbox that looked older than her entire civilization's space program. She floated through the airlocks wearing a bulky spacesuit that seemed to be cobbled together from a dozen different parts. "Where's your engine room?" she asked through the translator, her voice crackling with static. "We need to see what we're working with." Thalvin led her through the ship's corridors, past sophisticated quantum processors and gravity manipulators that should have been far beyond her understanding. But Hana seemed more interested in the basic power conduits and mechanical systems that the Valerians barely thought about. When they reached the engine room, Hana whistled softly. The massive quantum cores were dark and cold, surrounded by machinery that could bend space and time. But she ignored all the advanced technology and headed straight for the power distribution system. "There's your problem," she said, pointing at a series of connections that looked perfectly normal to Valerian eyes. "Your quantum cores are destabilizing because your power grid can't handle the feedback loops. You need buffer systems." The Valerian engineers exchanged glances. They had run thousands of calculations and simulations trying to fix this exact problem. Their most advanced computers had been working on it for days without success. "We don't have the materials for proper buffer systems," one of them explained patiently. "The exotic elements required are not available in this system." Hana opened her toolbox and started pulling out what looked like spare parts from a dozen different machines. "Who said anything about exotic elements? We'll use fusion containment fields as backup systems. Your quantum cores just need something to absorb the extra energy when they fluctuate." "That's impossible," the Valerian chief engineer protested. "Fusion containment technology is far too primitive to interface with quantum field manipulation." But Hana was already floating toward the nearest quantum core, her welding torch sparking as she began connecting human components to alien systems. Cables that had no business working together were somehow carrying power. Devices that should have exploded from incompatibility were humming along peacefully. "It shouldn't work," she muttered to herself as she worked, "but it will. Things don't always have to be perfect to get the job done." The Valerian engineers watched in amazement as their quantum cores began to stabilize for the first time in days. The impossible was happening right in front of their eyes. Young Valerian scientist Morketh had always believed that science was about precision, perfect calculations, and following exact procedures. That belief was completely shattered the moment he started working with Dr. Kim Soo in the makeshift repair bay aboard the human ship. Soo was trying to fix a critical component that connected the Valarian quantum drives to the human fusion systems. According to every law of physics that Morketh knew, the part they needed simply didn't exist. The two technologies were completely incompatible, like trying to connect a stone wheel to a rocket engine. But Soo just shrugged and started rummaging through a box of metal scraps. "We don't have the right part, so we'll make one," he said simply, pulling out pieces of what looked like broken machinery. Morketh watched in fascination as Soo began shaping the metal with nothing but basic tools and an incredible amount of determination. The human heated the metal with a simple torch, bent it with his bare hands, and somehow created a component that looked nothing like what the engineering manuals said it should look like. "This is impossible," Morketh said, his translator struggling with his amazement. "You're creating a quantum field stabilizer from scrap metal and what is that substance you're using?" "Duct tape," Soo replied cheerfully, wrapping the silvery material around several connections. It fixes everything. Well, almost everything. The component shouldn't have worked. By every rule of advanced engineering, it should have exploded the moment they turned it on. Instead, it hummed quietly and began doing exactly what they needed it to do. You repair things that should be irreparable, Morketh observed, his four eyes wide with wonder. How do you know it will work? Sue paused in his work and smiled. We don't. But we try anyway. Sometimes the best solutions come from not knowing that something is impossible. As the days passed, the two species began sharing more than just technical knowledge. The humans brought out something called music during their break periods, organized sounds that seemed to serve no practical purpose but somehow made everyone feel better. They shared their food, which was simple but flavorful, and told stories about their home planet that made the Valerians laugh, despite their desperate situation. In return, the Valerians taught the humans about advanced physics concepts that Earthly scientists had only dreamed about. Dr. Sue learned how to manipulate gravity fields with his bare hands. Engineer Park Hana discovered fusion techniques that could power entire cities with devices no bigger than a backpack. But the most important thing they shared was something neither species had expected: hope. Morketh had grown up in a civilization where everything was planned, calculated, and controlled. Problems had correct solutions, and if you couldn't find the correct solution, then the problem was unsolvable. The humans seemed to operate on completely different principles. They faced impossible problems with stubborn optimism, refusing to accept that anything was truly hopeless. Your people never give up, do they? Morketh asked Sue during one of their late-night repair sessions. Sue looked up from the quantum field generator. He was somehow repairing with a hammer and some wire. Give up? Why would we do that? Just because something looks impossible doesn't mean it is impossible. It just means we haven't figured it out yet. This attitude was spreading throughout both fleets. Valerian engineers were starting to try creative solutions instead of perfect ones. Human scientists were learning to think in ways they never had before. Both species were discovering that survival required more than knowledge or technology. It needed the belief that tomorrow could be better than today, no matter how bad things looked right now. Part 7. The Impossible Solution. The plan is completely insane, Thalvin stated flatly as Captain Li Min outlined the escape strategy. Using the system star as a gravitational slingshot, human ships would form a chain to guide the damaged alien vessels to safety. The precision required was beyond Valerian computers, but the humans insisted they could fly it manually. Trust us, Min said simply. We specialize in making impossible things work. Against all logic, Thalvin agreed. The bridge of the human flagship buzzed with activity as crew members prepared for what many considered a suicide mission. Captain Min stood at the center, his calm voice cutting through the chaos as he coordinated. With dozens of ship captains across the fleet, "Listen up, everyone," Min announced over the comm system. "I know this sounds crazy. Hell, it probably is crazy. But we've pulled off impossible things before, and we're going to do it again." Thalvin watched in amazement as human pilots volunteered without hesitation. These weren't military personnel following orders. They were merchants, traders, and explorers who had happened to be in the system when disaster struck. Yet each one stepped forward willingly. "The math doesn't lie," Lieutenant Chen explained to the alien commander, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. "If we time this perfectly, we can use the star's gravity to accelerate our ships while maintaining formation. But the margin for error is," she paused, "practically non-existent. Your computers calculate a 0.003% chance of success," Thalvin observed, his voice heavy with doubt. Captain Min grinned. "Good thing we're not relying on computers then. We're going to fly this by feel, by instinct, by pure human stubbornness." The formation began slowly. 12 human vessels arranged themselves in a precise pattern, their engines creating a delicate web of gravitational influences. Each ship had to maintain exact positioning while accounting for the massive pull of the nearby star. "Phoenix leader to all ships," came the voice of Commander Torres over the radio. "Remember, we're not just flying in formation. We're creating A path for our alien friends to follow. Every movement matters. Thalvan's own damaged cruiser shuddered as it took position behind the human fleet. Around him, 17 other Valerian ships limped into formation, their crews placing complete trust in these strange beings who claimed they could defy physics itself. As they approached the star's influence, the gravitational forces became overwhelming. Computer systems screamed warnings as the ships accelerated beyond safe parameters, but the human pilots held steady, making countless micro-adjustments based on nothing more than experience and intuition. "I'm getting pulled toward Sector 7, reported Captain Walsh from the outer edge of the formation. "Compensating," replied 3 other pilots simultaneously, adjusting their positions to maintain the chain's integrity. Thalvan felt his ship being guided through the cosmic dance, carried along by the invisible threads of gravity and thrust that the humans had somehow managed to weave together. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Slingshot maneuver in 30 seconds, Min announced. "Hold formation. Trust your instincts. And remember, we've got friends counting on us." The star's gravity grabbed them all, accelerating the entire formation to incredible speeds. For a moment that felt like eternity. 18 alien ships and 12 human vessels moved as one, threading the needle between destruction and salvation. When they finally broke free of the star's pull, racing toward open space at velocities that should have been impossible, Thalvan realized something profound had happened. The humans hadn't just saved his people. They had shown them what it meant to take impossible odds and make them possible through sheer determination and trust in each other. Part 8, Stars and Sacrifice. The combined fleet moved like a cosmic ballet around the star's gravity well. When Valerian calculations proved inadequate, Lieutenant Chobin broke formation in his small fighter, manually adjusting the trajectory of 3 massive alien ships. His vessel's hull cracked under the gravitational stress, but he held course until the aliens were safe. Bin's sacrifice allowed the entire fleet to escape the system, his final transmission a simple "mission accomplished." The Valerians would never forget the human who died to save strangers. The slingshot maneuver had begun flawlessly, but space has a way of humbling even the most careful plans. As the massive formation swept around the star, the gravitational forces proved more complex than anyone had anticipated. The delicate chain of ships started to waver. "Something's wrong with the Valerian heavy cruisers," reported Navigator Kim from the lead ship. "They're drifting off course. The gravity is pulling them into a spiral." Through the viewports, everyone could see the 3 largest alien vessels beginning to fall behind. Their damaged engines couldn't compensate for the unexpected gravitational anomalies near the star's surface. If they continued on their current path, they would be pulled into the star itself. "Adjusting formation to compensate," Captain Min ordered. But the computer simulations showed the grim reality. Any change to help the cruisers would destabilize the entire rescue chain, potentially dooming all 30 ships. That's when Lieutenant Cho Bin made his choice. "Phoenix 7 braking formation," his voice crackled over the comm as his small fighter peeled away from the protective formation. "Negative, Bin," Captain Min responded immediately. "Return to formation. That's a direct order." But Bin was already racing toward the struggling Valerian ships, his tiny fighter dwarfed by the massive alien cruisers. "Someone has to guide them out manually, Captain. My fighter's the only ship fast enough to reach them and agile enough to make the course corrections." The bridge fell silent as everyone realized what Bin was attempting. By leaving the formation's protective gravity bubble, his ship would be exposed to the full crushing force of the star's pull. His small fighter wasn't designed to handle such extreme conditions. "Thalvan, can you hear me?" Bin called out to the alien commander as he maneuvered. Between the 3 massive ships, "Human pilot, you must return to safety." Thalvan's voice was thick with concern. "Your vessel cannot survive in this gravity field." "Maybe not," Bin replied, his ship already beginning to groan under the stress. "But I can buy you enough time to adjust your course. Follow my lead and fire your engines on my mark." What happened next would be remembered as one of the most extraordinary displays of precision flying in recorded history. Despite his ship's hull beginning to buckle and crack, Bin danced between the 3 alien vessels, using his fighter's position to create gravitational reference points. His constant radio chatter guided the Valarian pilots through a series of complex maneuvers that gradually pulled them back toward the escape trajectory. "Hull integrity at 30%, Bin reported calmly, as metal began to peel away from his fighter. "But we're almost there. Valarian 3, increased thrust by 15% right now." The largest cruiser's engines flared to life, pushing it towards safety. One by one, Bin guided each ship back to the formation, even as his own vessel began to break apart around him. "Mission accomplished," were his final words as his fighter finally succumbed to the gravitational forces, disappearing into the star's brilliant embrace. The silence that followed was profound. 30 ships continued their journey to safety, but the cost of salvation weighed heavily on every soul aboard. Theolovin stood at his command post, staring at the empty space where a brave human had given everything to save strangers he had never met. Part 9. New Alliances. 6 months later, the Valarian fleet reached their homeworld, escorted by their human saviors. The rescue had become legend across the galaxy, a primitive species achieving the impossible through courage and compassion. Ambassador Thalvin established the first interstellar embassy on Earth, while Dr. Kim Soo led humanity's first diplomatic mission to Valarian space. "You saved us with more than technology," Thalvin told the assembled crowd. "You showed us that the greatest advancement is the willingness to help others, no matter the cost." The journey to Valarian space had transformed both species in ways neither could have imagined. As the combined fleet traveled through the cosmos, humans and Valarians worked side by side, sharing stories, knowledge, and dreams. What began as a rescue mission had evolved into something far more profound. Dr. Kim Soo found herself amazed at how quickly the barriers between species dissolved. In the ship's common areas, human engineers taught Valarian technicians how to improvise repairs using whatever materials were available, while Valarian scientists shared their advanced understanding of quantum physics with fascinated human researchers. "Your people are remarkable," Captain Min told Thalvin during one of their evening discussions in the observation deck. "Your technology is centuries ahead of ours, but you've maintained something we humans sometimes lose in our rush to advance." Deep respect for life and knowledge. Thalvin nodded, watching the stars stream past. "And your people have something we had forgotten, the courage to act without certainty, to take risks for others, even when logic says it's impossible." The arrival at Valaria Prime was unlike anything in the planet's history. Never before had alien vessels entered their solar system as friends and allies. The entire planet watched as the human fleet took protective formation around the damaged Valarian ships, ensuring their safe passage home. As news of the rescue spread across Valarian society, something unprecedented happened. Citizens from every corner of their world demanded to learn more about these strange beings who had risked everything for strangers. The Valarian Council, traditionally cautious about outside contact, voted unanimously to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. Dr. Kim Soo stood before the Valarian High Assembly, the first human ever to address their governing body. Her words were simple but powerful. "We didn't save you because we expected anything in return. We did it because it was right. That's what humans do. We help when we can, we fight when we must, and we never abandon those in need." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Valarian scientists volunteered to share their medical technology to help treat Earth's diseases. Their engineers offered to teach humans about clean energy systems that could heal Earth's damaged environment. Most importantly, they promised to stand with humanity if other threats emerged in the galaxy. Thalvin's embassy on Earth became a symbol of this new partnership. Located in Geneva, the sleek alien structure attracted visitors from around the world who came to see proof that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Inside, human and Valarian diplomats worked together to establish trade agreements, scientific exchanges, and mutual defense pacts. But the most important change wasn't in technology or politics, it was in perspective. Humans learned that intelligence and wisdom could take many forms, while Valarians discovered that sometimes the greatest solutions came not from advanced calculations, but from the simple willingness to try. Lieutenant Chobin's sacrifice saved more than our ships, Thalvan explained to a gathering of human and Valarian leaders. It showed us that true strength isn't in having the most powerful weapons or the fastest computers. It's in having the courage to risk everything for others, even when those others are complete strangers. As both species looked to the future, they knew that this alliance would change the galaxy forever. The rescue that began with a desperate distress call had created something neither species could have achieved alone. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared sacrifice, and the simple but powerful belief that all intelligent life deserved protection and dignity.